All right, this is video number 4 in quarantine history. And today we're going to talk about the Russian Revolution and then how Russia kind of impacted the war, and when they left, it impacted the war. And this may be 2 videos because I don't really want it to go too over long. And this one is for Erica, one of my students when I interned in Colbert Heights. And Erica, I'm going to be honest with you. I love the Russians and I love the Romanovs. This is not my strongest section. So if you need me to go deeper in this, I can. It would just take me some research time to do it. But today is just going to be a basic Russian Revolution and then how it impacts World War One, because what does happen between Lenin and Germany will impact World War Two. Okay, so just a little back history. The Tsar of Russia during World War One was Tsar Nicholas, and he was not the most strongest of rulers out there. His wife was the granddaughter of Queen Victoria, and she was German, and so that's very important to remember because she's German. Okay, and theirs is a love match. They loved one another. They had 4 daughters, and then they had 1 son. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that in Russia, it was illegal actually for a woman to be the leader of the country. Catherine the Great's son had made that a legal ruling that women could not run the country. So it was very, very important to the Romanovs that they have a son. They had 4 daughters, and they were despairing of a child, male child. And if they didn't have a male child, it was going to go to like a distant nephew or a cousin or something. So they were very, very desperate to have a son. So I'll get to that in a minute. I don't want to get ahead of myself. So Nicholas and Alexandra are running the government. And so some backstory on Russia at this point. Russia, of course, is very, very rural country. They did not have a lot of industry, and they did not have a lot of progress. And it was made even worse by Nicholas's grandfather, Alexander II. He had tried reforms and they didn't work, and he had basically given land from the nobles to the peasants. But the problem is that he didn't specify what land he could give to the peasants. And so the peasants got very, very poor land. And so then they were upset because they were like, well, we might as well be beholden to the owners that we were before, because we have no way of making money, and we have no way of feeding our families. At least when we were part of the ownership of the nobles, we could feed our families. And then the nobles were mad at him because he gave away their land, or he made them sell their land. So Alexander II is assassinated, and his son takes over, and he goes back and he takes away all of those reformations that he had started, and things that he had done to try to change. So now we have Nicholas. And so we're going to go back to, I don't think it's in there. So we're going to go over here for just a second. And we're going to talk about what happened. So before World War One, Russia had fought a war with Japan and lost. And what was happening is Russia was trying to make their way in the world. They were trying to prove that they were a superpower, and all they were really doing is proving that they weren't a superpower. So in 1905, there was a lot of protesters who went to the palace in St. Petersburg. I believe it was in St. Petersburg. And they were protesting, and they were very peaceful about it, but they were protesting the lack of jobs, the lack of food, and the lack of change within the government. And Tsar Nicholas ordered his men to kill them. And so they ended up shooting hundreds of these peaceful protesters. And this is going to be known as Red Sunday or Bloody Sunday. And so the people of Russia are not happy with him, obviously, because they've shot a bunch of people that were there protesting peacefully. And so this is just going to kind of set up the country for not liking the czar. Okay, so we'll get to the book in just a second. So Tsar Nicholas really did not have any military experience, but because he was czar, he was unwilling to let others step in and help him make decisions. And so he was insistent on taking care of the armed forces despite having no military background. And so they were so behind the world that they were forced to train their soldiers using broomsticks because they had no factories to make weapons or ammunition. And so when they sent these men to the front lines for World War One, they told them just go out on the battlefields and take a weapon. Like, yeah, you may get killed, but if you don't, go out there and get a weapon. Now, this was not uncommon. One of the things and kind of like the weird history, what I'm going to do is that it was very, very common for thousands of years for people to go out on the battlefields and scavenge the dead. And they were scavenging the dead for whatever they could get that was worth any money, even to the point of taking out their teeth, because teeth were valuable. You could use them to make false teeth for other people. But you also, like, if there was any type of a metal in there, gold or whatever, it could be used for money. Ironically, in the Civil War, the most scavenged thing off of the dead body was shoes. It wasn't ammunition, it wasn't guns. Clothes, yes, it was the second most, but shoes were the number one scavenged body off the bodies in the Civil War. But anyway, back to Russia. The soldiers did not have weapons, and so they were told to go onto the battlefield and to take weapons off of dead soldiers. So between 1914 and 1916, 2 million Russian soldiers were killed, and another 4 to 6 million were wounded or captured. And I want you to listen to that: 2 million killed, and 4 to 6 million were wounded or captured. So you have that going on the front lines of the war, which they're not prepared for, and the people know that. And then back at home, the people are starving. There's no jobs, there's no food, there's nothing for them. Okay. So Nicholas goes to the front lines, and he joins the front lines because he's going to be their leader. And so he's relying on the army left at home to keep his family safe. Well, the problem is that his wife is German and nobody trusts her, including the army that is there to protect her. She was not liked. People didn't trust her. They thought she was a German spy. And there you see the Tsar with his wife and their 4 daughters. Okay. So she had fallen under the spell and influence of a mystical Siberian man who called himself a holy man called Grigory Rasputin. Now, let's find out why she did. Grigory told her that he could heal her son. Now, why her son needed to be healed was he had a disease called hemophilia. Now, hemophilia is a hereditary disease, and I think I'm correct on this because I've had 2 students with hemophilia, and they both told me that it runs on the mother's side of the family, but it only, in some cases, I think this is correct, it only hurts the males. Like, only the males of the family get it. So in this case, the daughters did not have hemophilia, but Alexei did, and that's the son. Now, hemophilia is a free bleeding disease, so any little cut or bruise he could die from. Now, a bruise was a little bit worse because you don't always see a bruise, so he could be bleeding internally. So they had literally wrapped this child up in cotton cloth, metaphorically, his whole life. And his sisters were very, very cautious of playing with him, and they didn't let the public know because the public cannot know that the son that's going to rule is sick. He could die. And so Grigory tells her that he can cure her son. Well, the thing of it is he probably did have some knowledge of healing, and he probably was able to, in some way, help the blood not flow as freely as it could. there would be some medicines, some herbs, some poultices maybe that he could use that would mimic um, stopping the blood flow, but there was no cure for it at that time. So Alexei is the last and only child of Nicholas. He's heir to the throne. He has hemophilia. And how you get this back then, not now, is you got it from intermarrying. And the cousins were marrying cousins, were marrying cousins, were marrying cousins, and they had for thousands of years, really. If you look at the Habsburg line in from Spain and what would have been the Holy Roman Empire, um, they some bad deformities ended up there. Jawlines out of place, tongues too thick for their mouths, craziness. I mean, they call Juanita from Spain crazy Juanita for a reason. So there's a lot of problems with intermarrying that they didn't know at that time. Now, if you have hemophilia now, it doesn't mean that you married your cousin. It just means somewhere down the line there was cousins that married, and this is where the term "new blood" comes from. They literally needed new blood in order to get the blood thicker, the blood to be better. Um, One of the reasons why they were not so opposed to Princess Diana coming into the royal family because she was new blood. So the blood can't clot if Alexei is hurt. And so this comes from intermarriage. They don't know that yet. Intermarrying cousins. And so Alexei is sick and Alexandra is desperate. And so she turns to Grigori to be able to heal her son. So the czar's at the front lines. Alexandra is making all the decisions, but she would consult Rasputin for these decisions. And his influence was ever growing over Alexandra and in the government. And he would make decisions. He would go and address the public and say, I'm making these decisions. And the people didn't like that because who is this guy? They already don't like her. So now she's in a position where she's giving him orders, but it looks like it's coming from him. So it's just a mess all around. She sends a letter to Alex I'm sorry, Nicholas on the front lines, and she says these hooligans are making a problem within the government. All right, so the Russian people are getting more and more upset with the Tsarist monarchy. People are starving. The Romanovs are living in massive palaces. And this is a great correlation to the French Revolution. The same thing, the monarchs were out of touch. They had no idea what it took to feed families, and they had no idea what it took to make a living. And because they're living in splendor and they're starving. These are two revolutions that were fought over bread, literally bread, not having food to eat. In fact, the chant in Russia is peace, land, and bread. They wanted their men to come home. They wanted land to live on and to farm, and they wanted bread to eat. So people are upset with Rasputin, his continued interference with the government. And he's finally assassinated in December of 1916. And this is when the Bolsheviks are coming to power slowly. And he had incredible strength. He was shot 3 times. He was poisoned. He was stabbed. And they finally tied him up and threw him into the Neva River. And he drowned, but he was still able to untie his hands before he drowned. So this is why he gets this supernatural kind of moniker on him, that he was a supernatural being. We don't know what he was other than crazy eyes is what I call him. Okay, so after he's assassinated, there's a series of strikes that start happening in 1917. And this is where I'm really going to condense this because, boy, it can go deep, deep, deep. But these are going to be led by working class women in Petrograd. And I tell my students this. This is 2 times in history that we know of that women have marched. The first one was the march to Versailles in the French Revolution. And now here, over 10,000 women are marching, and it was over 10,000 marched at Versailles. And I tell my kids, if you're ever in a place of power and you look out your window and you see a bunch of women marching towards you, you better run because it's not going to end well for you. Okay. So bread rationing had started. Women were standing in line for bread after working 12 hours in the factories. They were going home to starving children. And so they're not happy. And so they're marching through the city demanding peace, land, and bread. And then other workers are joining, and the strike shuts down the factories. She calls it a hooligan movement, and that's where I say it right there. He orders the troops to break up the crowds by shooting at them, but here's the problem: the troops are shooting into their families. Their families are the ones that are starving, and the soldiers are like, no, not going to do that. So they joined in the demonstrations, and they refused to fire on the crowds. Okay. Now, let me see. I keep wanting to go in here. So he had established a parliament called the Duma, um, and the Duma met again to discuss the situation. And at this point, they said, it's best if you just step down. And this is really not where the Bolsheviks had come into power yet, but the Bolsheviks were there. And the people in the government were basically just saying, let's just it's you step down, let's try to fix this, and then we'll see about you coming back to power. And so he sees that the people are not happy with him, the military's not happy with him. He has no choice at this point but to step down. And he steps down in 1917, and it ends the 300 years of Romanian rule. I'm sorry, not Romanian rule, Romanov rule. Now, here's the thing. He always hopes to get back into power, and he hopes that his son will take power. And so that's why he kind of cedes to this pretty quickly, because he's like, okay, well, let's fix the problem. I'll be part of the solution instead of part of the problem, and then we'll get back to it. Okay, so what actually happens at this point is where the wheels fall off the wagon. And this is Alexander Kerensky, and he is now put in charge of the government. And I mean, like, you hear, and you told the czar to step down because the people are starving and they're tired of being in this war. And he decides to put him back into the war. Now, a couple of vocabulary things. Soviet, small s, just means a council of workers. Think of it like your town council or your city council. That is your representatives in your city. And then those representatives meet in a bigger picture. Okay. So think about it like your city has town councils, and then they go to the state maybe for a meeting. So that's what a Soviet is, small s. Okay. So he decides to participate in the war, which is totally against what the people want. And the people are like, what are you doing? And so the Soviets, these people who are meeting, are telling him, you are crazy. Like, you're going to completely opposite of what we need. We need someone who is going to feed us and to give us land and to give us jobs. And so this is where the Bolsheviks come in. The Bolsheviks were a very, very small group of people, but they quickly gain power because they say, we can do this. We can fix the problem. So the Bolsheviks come into power under Lenin. Now, Lenin was a communist socialist. He had read the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx. He approved of it. He liked it. Let me go back to this other page real quick. Lenin seized the power, and he demanded a government for the workers and by the workers. All right, so let me tell you how he seized this. He's in Germany. This is brilliant on Germany's part. Oh my gosh, I would like to meet the person who came up with this idea, because this is brilliant. He's in Germany, and he's creating a little issue in Germany. He's creating these little underground communist countries, groups, which is actually going to still be a problem even after he leaves. But Germany sees the problems that are going on in Russia. And He sees the problems going on. They see the problems going on in Russia, and they see that there's protests, and they've gotten rid of their czar, and Kerensky's in power, and Kerensky's stupid, and they need Russia out of the war. Germany does, and they're like, if we can get Germany out of the war, we can win this. Because I'm sorry, Germany says we can get Russia out of the war, we can end this. And I hope I didn't confuse you. And because at this point in time, America's not in the war, and they're Germany is losing bad. They are losing men, they are losing money, they are losing ammunition. They are really in trouble, and they need Russia out. And if they can get Russia out before the Americans get in, then they think they can win it. So they pack Lenin up on a train and send him to Russia, and it's like, go have problems there, go create problems there. So Lenin goes to Russia. He takes over the Bolsheviks. He establishes a government, and he's in charge of the government. And this is where he becomes part of the government. He creates jobs, not right away, but the main thing he does is he does stabilize the government in some sort. They take the Romanovs hostage, and I shouldn't say hostage. They kind of keep them under uh, at home arrest, I guess you could say. And so he establishes a government, first stable government in a while, and they're establishing jobs, they're establishing food, they're dividing up land. And the biggest thing he does, and this is going to be a point that we're going to make leading up to causes of World War One. He signs a treaty called the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, which gives the Central Powers, which is Germany, a lot of land. Okay. So they give this land to Germany, and they tell Germany, we're getting out of the war. We've got problems at home. So we're going to kind of give you we're going to kind of back you in this war. And we're going to back you in this war by giving you this land under the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. And this is very, very important for the Treaty of Versailles. And so when Germany gets this land, they are confident that they are now going to win the war. All right, so let me go back over here because we're talking about the Russians, and we'll get to Germany and all that later. All right, so the Bolsheviks will become a party dedicated to revolution. He sees a change for power. He promised under his leadership to end the war, get land for the people, and transfer the power of the people to the people. So the Bolsheviks are going to rise from 50,000 to 240,000. He places Leon Trotsky in charge of the Petrograd Soviets. They seize the Winter Palace. They will take the name of communist now. And so they will now become leaders of this country. And that's a whole nother section for the Cold War. But it's important to note 3 or 4 things. They have a revolution because they have no power. The people don't. They have no food. Someone comes to power that says we can take care of that, Lenin, and he does for the most part. Stalin will be another issue later. But the biggest thing that happens in this section is that the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk that gives all this land to Germany. And it gives them Poland, Ukraine, Finland, and the Baltic provinces. And so with this treaty, Russia leaves World War One. They're still fighting their revolution in their country, but they leave World War One. And this gives Germany the idea now that they will win the war. There's civil war still going on in Russia. People in Russia were against the new communist government. They wanted change, but they felt like this was too oppressive because they weren't getting the power that they thought they were getting. It was all going to the government. The Allied powers are trying to help those who wanted to remove the communists. So now we're now fighting a war in France and Europe, and then they're sending people into Russia to fight the communists. And honestly, allies didn't know what they were fighting. They were like, "Why are we here? What are we fighting this? What is a communist?" And that's really, I'm not going to go more into that because that's going to fall more into the Cold War section. I just wanted to briefly touch on this for the Russian Revolution in terms of World War One. So this will be something we'll come back to if I do a Cold War one. I'm getting a lot of interesting requests to do different types of videos, and once I get through with some of the World War One and leading to World War Two, and even in between there, I will do those. So this is video number 4 in your quarantine history, and this is World War One and Russian Revolution. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope I haven't been too scattered today. I've had a little bit of a migraine this morning, but I wanted to get this one in. And if I'm able to get another one in today, I will. That will talk about more of the end of the war. And we'll come back to this, like I said, for Cold War, possibly. All right. I hope everyone has a good day. It is Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020. And we will see you guys for video number 5. Thank you.